Welcome to the Keeba Live Podcast. I'm your host, William Lee, and we're going to have a great show today. So sit back, relax, and let's get going. Welcome, everybody. It's great to be here today, and well, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be here. We're going to be talking about an interesting subject today, and one that, kind of stands out into my mind. It really does stand out into my mind, and it's the homeless situation that we've got going on. You know, I've talked to so many different people throughout the months, actually, about the homeless and what's going on. And, you know, I get some interesting information back, or views back, actually, as far as that goes, on what people think the homeless situation's all about. You know, you see the panhandlers on the corner of the street, and you see the guys with the wheelchairs rolling up the sidewalk with a little cardboard sign that they've taken a felt pen and marked down homeless, need $1, or buy me a beer, or I'm sick in my family and I'm out of work, God bless. How much more time will be spent on the subject of the homeless? Will the cities actually take a look, and communities, advocates actually jump in and start doing something about the homeless? Or is this just the beginning of what I call homeless zombies? Now, I don't want you to think of a zombie as one of those, guys wheeling a machete around and chopping people up. I don't want you to think of them as, those creepy people from the crypt, or the mysterious devil-mongers who sweep around in the darkness and jump on individuals and suck their blood. I don't want you to think about any of that stuff, because that's not the point of this conversation at all. The point of this conversation is just simply this. There are homeless individuals that are now on our street corners. They're living in our parks. They're on our city sidewalks. They're everywhere, panhandling, or just wandering, aimlessly wandering around looking for a place to grab a quick bite out of a dumpster or find a place to sleep. It's sad to see this. It really is. Now, I come from a very small community when I first was growing up called Puyallup, Washington. It wasn't that big of a town, by the way. It was just a small, really community-oriented town. And I was raised not seeing homeless people, to be very honest with you. As the years grew by, and they fly by quickly, I had an opportunity to visit other cities and other places in our great Pierce County area, and never see a homeless person walking around. I mean, you just didn't see that. It was unheard of. It was kind of like back in the 60s when we had the beatniks, and the coffee houses, and when LSD was the drug of choice, and the music of free love, and hippies running around were a cult, a whole society which sprung up out of the music world. Hallucinations and drugs, free love, disease, starvation. Was that maybe the part that we overlooked? Could that have been the beginning of the homeless? The deterioration of that free love and commune living and just living off the land, all of a sudden turning into what I call this trauma called homelessness? Let's look at homelessness today, and let's take a look and see what we find. There are several types of homelessness, to be very honest with you. I like to categorize it down into two functions. Number one, those who choose to become homeless. Number two, those who have given up their community, their lives, because of the influx of drugs. That day-to-day high that they have to accomplish when families are destroyed because maybe the mother or the father or maybe the children get addicted to meth, heroin, or street drugs, or simple painkillers that are prescribed by doctors to handle physical ailments that the patient depends on and becomes an addict to, who will do anything to keep that pain tolerance down, the one that's manually operated through the pharmacy drawer. It's horrible. Now, when I grew up, my mother, unfortunately, had some bad operations that didn't work out too well. One on her back, several of them on her back. Unfortunately, she suffered from arthritis. And after years and years of taking medications, Mom, who I love dearly, became, let's just say it, an actual addict to prescriptions. The things that she did in the later part of her life, I don't think she really realized. She only realized that she needed to kill that pain. Now, she had an extremely bad back, many operations, and many techniques to try to straighten up and handle the pain situation, but it never worked out for her. But she never turned out to be a street person. She never gave up her values. She kept the home lights burning. These people that are out in the streets today are a completely different generation, you say. Well, are they? Let's look back. Let's go back into the 60s. Let's talk about the boys who come home, the men who come home and serve our country. Let's talk about those who have served in Vietnam, who came home broken. Let's talk about those that served in the World War I, World War II, and all the other wars that this nation has fought. How many of those people do you suppose came home broken? They were proud to serve our military, as the men and women today are. But folks, they come home broken. Some of them, unfortunately, lose limbs. And we help them, rehabilitate them, and put them back into society. But there is that percentage that come home mentally broken. And only 1% of those people are getting help today. Lives are being ruined, and the only time we ever hear about them is when a soldier goes insane and shoots up a house or burns the building down with his family in it, or does something absolutely, to us, horrible. What kind of reasoning could a human being have? What kind of reasoning could a human being have that came back from many deployments to areas in this world where the monsters really live? When I say monsters, I mean people who have no conscience. They are fighting a religious war that's warped on a completely different vision of what religion's about. And those who come from the Taliban or ISIS or any other of those terrorist groups have decided now that they're going to take on the world. They're going to get rid of all of us, and only their people will survive, I guess, or their cult. Our men and women are fighting this war as they have done proudly through all the wars of our country that have been involved in. And these guys are coming home. And these ladies are coming home with the horrors of seeing blood, the horrors of seeing everything that they were raised to believe and trust in destroyed. Cruelty, sadism, torture, all of this, day after day after day, while you fight to survive, while your body can't get full rest because you're sleeping in a trench or under a half-track in the middle of the desert, praying that you'll wake up the next morning, praying that you'll be able to go home and see your family again. And when you do go home, the baggage you carry, because your friends, maybe your relatives, your comrades you've seen slain, maybe you've seen villages wiped out and bodies all over the streets. I could go on and on and on about this horror show. Vietnam was a horror show also, just in a different region of the world. And our soldiers came home, and some of them were broken, and they did not get help. Think about it. Think about the people that, even today, when you simply go in to wake them up, when their lovely wives go in to say good morning, or wake them up, or get them all fired up for the day, have to use a broom handle to touch them because they're afraid that their loved one, who loves them dearly, will come at an attention to fight for survival and not even realize that that's their wife or their children. How about the nightmares that these people have to go through? How about the mental torture? Just the other day, I had an opportunity at one of the meetings that the Wild Child group holds. It's called a forum. And we had a meeting for nonprofits. These are the people that are out, hometown, grassroots individuals that are building or have built foundations, such as, for instance, the House of Matthews, who works on finding homes and rehabilitating people, especially men, that are homeless, or Absolute Living, the Absolute Ministries, a small individual group that takes those that are fighting alcoholism and drug addiction and putting them back so that they can work unbroken into the societies that we have today. One of the groups that was at this meeting, I had the opportunity of meeting I'd say 2 years before, maybe 3. And it was a man and wife, and she was a dynamo. She's a spark that you can't really visualize until you meet her. Her husband was a military man who has served for our country for many years and got out of the military, tried regular living in the community and found that he needed to build an income and jobs were short, so he went into the reserves and re-signed up. Now, I knew him with a spark, a sense of humor. Off-the-wall kind of guy that had a smile that you just wanted to shake his hand and be happy to be around. Last month, I met him again at this meeting I'm referring to, which is the Wild Child Forum. His wife and he stood up and talked about what it's like to come home broken. She bared her soul about all the problems and the fact that she loved her husband, but this trip back, number 11, caused more problem and more pain for their family than ever before. And he didn't know what to do about it because he had lost mentally control. Isn't it sad? Now, a lot of time the wives just walk out, take the kids, and throw them out in the door. These people walk the streets or hide in the woods or completely invert themselves into a world of their own, staying away from all of the communities or all of the family activities. They just isolate themselves. And when pressured, can become very, very, very dangerous. This gentleman stood before all of us and talked about getting therapy and getting help. I wish you could have been there. I wish you could have seen what I saw before in the face of this gentleman and then afterwards, and how he is struggling to come back, how he's working his way through the mental torture of watching war and being a part of killing and war. It's unbelievable. His wife has decided to build a foundation. Trish didn't give up on their marriage. She stood up for the marriage. She worked hard. And instead of getting a divorce or walking away, she took her hand and extended it to his hand. And they walked together through therapy and through a change of life experiences. Now she wants to help the rest and continue the growing process of helping those military personnel who cannot like, so many men now that are on the street cannot control or handle. It's terrible. It's awful. And these things that happen all the time, and people don't realize it. You can hear crying babies in the past as their fathers walk out the door, and they don't even understand why. They don't understand anything about war. They don't understand anything but how much they love their dad and how he's changed and why does he reject me. Why families argue and continue on because of this mental draining that has happened to their dad or their mom who has served this country.